So let's bring this to the modern day. I know when I heard about this book, I'm like, polygamy, like people just kind of now forgotten about it. They don't really take it seriously. Even Gordon B. Hinckley on Larry King Live said, that it's in the past. It's no longer doctrinal, and I think there's sort of this big catch-all in Mormonism about the afterlife, which you write about very directly, which is Heavenly Father is a loving God, and He'll figure it all out in the afterlife. And so even my own mother, honestly, who's sealed to a man, who's sealed to his late wife, when I asked my mom about being a plural wife in heaven, she's literally just like, you know what, it's all going to be fine in the afterlife. I'm not even worried. Heavenly Father's going to figure it out. Having said that, you have 8,000 narratives that you've received from women and men talking about how the teachings around polygamy are still affecting women in the church today. Can you give us a sample of how these teachings are literally affecting people's happiness, health, and well-being in 2017?
Sure. Some of the individuals who are particularly affected by this, and I grant to you, John, that there are women who will say, that doesn't bother me. That doesn't. But for every one of those, I think I could find a lot of women who either will acknowledge that it's very difficult for them, or have put it so far down in their psyche that it's there causing trouble in their personality and in the way they see the world, the way they see themselves, and the way they see their husband. And so that it does cause a significant problem. Some of the women who are most, well, let's talk about my survey for just a moment then, as long as you brought that up.
Please.
I knew that I wanted to do something about this subject because I had received so many stories from women. I started getting stories from women when I first 50 years ago when I put out that little book called Beginnings. Women began to trust me and write me their stories that sometimes were just very painful. And some of them had to do with their feelings about polygamy. So I quickly began to learn that a lot of young women who they understand that if they die soon, certainly their husband is going to be sealed to another woman, and that will make them automatically eternal polygamists. And I had been getting all of these various stories, and I thought, I want to do something with these, but I don't know what to do. So I'm going to really shorten all this. But I had a really good conversation with Greg Prince, who convinced me to do a major survey just with my own name. So I put out a survey just on social media asking for Mormon and ex-Mormon women and men to just take this survey. And we had established quite a few questions about how they felt about the inequality in the sealing practice. And you know what is meant when I say the inequality in the sealing practice, that a man can go back to the temple and have another woman sealed to him, which is not the case with a woman.
And we have at least 2 members of the First Presidency who have done just that. Is that right?
Indeed we have. That the top 2 leaders in our church today,
Russell M. Nelson
and
Dallin
H.
Oaks, have been sealed to a second
They
wife.
are eternal polygamists.
Right.
So I sent out this survey wanting to get information, and at the end saying, if you could tell me your story, or the story of somebody near to you who has had some kind of an experience with this, I would appreciate it. And so on day number 1, I wrote an email to Greg, who was more involved with the actual mechanics of the survey, and I said, could you look and see how many people had taken the survey today? And I was hoping, maybe there would have been 300 or 400 or 500. That would be great. So he got back to me and said, it's 10 o'clock now in the East. And today, so far, we've had over 2,400 people take this survey.
One day.
And then he added, this blows the faith crisis survey out of the water. So we just waited, and every day the number was larger. And when we closed the survey down, after having had it open for 4 weeks, we had over 8,000 people taking the survey. And so I spent months reading through all of the answers to all of these questions. But the part that really interested me was at the end when I had asked for stories, because that's what I really, really wanted. And so I, in my very non-technological fashion, put out my yellow Post-it notes here and there and here and there, and began to write down certain themes that began to emerge. Widow, husband, bringing up other man's children, and all of these different themes, and I correlated the number with that, and I began to create these different documents. And so I found that I had so many stories. And of course I could never find out who wrote these stories. It was totally anonymous. But I estimated that there were about 15% of these stories that were saying something like, polygamy is just wonderful. You just have to have more faith. But about 85% of them were stories of enormous heartbreak. And so I thought, well, it appears that I'm going to have to write a book about these, because I have the material. And so I began to gather all of these stories into their thematic place and decide what chapter. And I initially thought, I'll just give these stories out, and that's what will be the book. And then I thought, no, I kind of want to be in the book. And so I decided that I would bring my own persona into the book as well as bringing certainly not any new historical material. I'm not a scholar who could find some brand new thing from way back there, but I wanted to give a thread of history so we could see why some of these things had developed as they did. And then to that, add these stories, mostly from these women as well as from these men. And, you know, one of the very first stories that I got was from a woman, and then well, she had told her story on the survey, but she also emailed me, and I just could hardly bear all that she was telling me. That she said, I'm a young mother, and I'm happily married, but the anxiety is always there, this terror, and it has turned me into a hypochondriac. I don't fear death, but I know that if I die young, my husband will have another woman sealed to him, and I will live in eternal polygamy. I fast and I pray, but no peace comes. I've spent many nights in tears. I go to a therapist, but she can't help me at all because the church has not changed its policy on this. So I spend my whole life going to doctors saying, if we catch the cancer early, I won't die, and then he won't marry again and be sealed again, and then I won't be an eternal polygamist. And she weeps during the night. So these are just normal women who are fearing death because it will very likely mean that they, without their permission at all, are going to become eternal polygamists. So that is a large group of women, probably all women, because we're all in danger of that. And we're all in danger of living wonderful lives and getting to the celestial kingdom, and there we'll meet it. Because our husband will be a righteous man, And he will be offered the opportunity to take another one or two or however many wives. You know, back in the 1800s, they talked about, well, that there must be hundreds of mothers in heaven in order to get all of these planets populated and all of that. So this is still deep in our Mormon psyche.
Not just
and
that,
frightens
but
us.
for a long time in the 19th century, leaders taught that you could not achieve exaltation
Right, absolutely.
without being a polygamist. Is that right?
That's absolutely
So we've
right.
got all that doctrine, quote, doctrine on the books of prophetic statements uttered by the first presidency.
Right, and those are not quoted out, but they have never been thrown out. And so they're still there. So this is one way in which nearly all women, and some women, are deeply, deeply hurt. This anticipation. And you know, there are a lot of women who love their husbands dearly, but the stories I get from them, and they almost all say the same words. I find myself holding back part of my heart from my husband, even in our most intimate moments, because I have this image that one day, even in eternity, this beautiful intimacy that he and I now share will be shared by him with many other women, or at least one or two others. And so one of them said, I hold back a part of my heart so that when the blow comes, I will have still a little part of myself left. Now that's just terrible. We talk about wanting to have strong Mormon marriages. You want strong Mormon marriages? Get rid of this ridiculous concept of eternal polygamy. And this dear man who perhaps knows that his wife, who loves him, just kind of withdraws. He has nothing to give her. He can't rewrite all that. So this is another great category of hurt. And another great category of hurt was developed from what you just heard about the widows. The young Mormon widows sometimes call themselves the Mormon lepers, because good Mormon men are not really enthusiastic about dating them. I mean, they've already been claimed by somebody else. And then if one of these, and I tell very interesting stories in the book, I hope you will read those.
Just to drive this home, you're a single Mormon man, and you meet a woman who you may or may not love, but you find out she's already been sealed to her late husband. In your mind, you can't marry her because you don't want to build a life with someone who won't be your eternal partner in the hereafter. So it's church dances or activities. Oh, why are you here? Like, you shouldn't be here.
Right, and
right?
Absolutely. And rude statements that have been made. You're no good to any of us. Why are you on this cruise? Or how was it one? A woman put it. So this man that I was wanting to date said to me, you know, if I fell in love with you and married you, I would spend my whole life making you into a celestial being that I knew I would have to turn over to your husband once we got to the next life. Why would I do that?
Because husbands make women celestial beings.
Well, so anyway, there is this terrible dilemma that is not solvable. So the widow thing is one more terrible thing. And while we're at it, so let's look at, see, it's not that polygamy is terrible for women and great for men. Polygamy is terrible for men. You know, there are some men write, when I was a teenager, I thought, oh, that's the greatest thing I can look forward to, all these great wives in the celestial kingdom. And then I grew up and I thought, what is this? This would be terrible. So, but let's say here's a man who starts to date a widow, and he falls in love with her. I have one long, beautiful story in here I want you to read. But so here's a theoretical man who somehow, I'm going to I love this woman. I'm going to marry her. And they do marry. And they have children. And he knows, and he is taught by the doctrines of the church, he knows that these children that have come from his own loins, from his DNA, they don't really belong to him.
Because?
Nor does his wife really belong to him. Because just like Joseph told the 12, you can raise up earthly children that you will then give to me once I meet you in the eternities. So this man who has married this widow, had children with her, knows he is raising these children that are not his, and that he will lose them in the eternities to be in the divine kingdom of this man who got there first, who has the patriarchal privilege of having now that the woman is still sealed to him. And of course, this woman has the possibility of breaking that sealing, but that's a hard thing. And there are a lot of reasons why these sealings wait months and years and are not even done. And when some of the sealings are done, the woman has to, in fact, I have read in these stories that came to me, she has to drag that dead husband through the mud to prove that somehow it is okay for her to leave him and be sealed now to this new husband. And then, so what do? We're leaving him out there floating, unexalted. Why do that to somebody? And there's the most heartbreaking story here of an older woman who she had her children with her first husband, and he died. And she has lived now 30 years with another husband that she just adores now. And there's always this question and this fear, I'm going to lose him when we die. And on one occasion, her children approached her and said, Mom, we know how much you love your current husband. We want to give you permission to break the sealing with our Father so that you can be sealed to the husband that you now love so much. And it was hard for them to do. And she wept as she heard her children say that. But she did go ahead and have that sealing canceled. And then as she wrote in this story to me, that ruined the relationship she had had for 30 years with the family of her first husband. They chopped her off every list. They refused to look at her if she came to a family gathering at church. She was in effect dead to the family that she had had a beautiful relationship with of her first husband. Where is Christ in that kind of circumstance? He would never want that to happen. It's our ridiculous idea that we have this chart and this authority in front of us, that we can draw these stick figures and say, oh, this male figure goes with this female figure. Now let's surround him with another couple of skirts here. Oh, no, let's erase that one. Let's do this. Let's do this over here. It becomes the most ridiculous chart you could ever think of creating, and that's what we do. And it breaks the hearts of women, and it breaks the hearts of men. And I have stories from men who really believe with all their hearts that they are raising children that should be their own, that are in reality being that they will live eternally with a man that they have never known. And what is the confusion of these children? Somehow when they study all this, they're told, well, you won't live eternally with this man you think is your father. You will live eternally with a new father that you've never met. It gets more and more ridiculous and heartbreaking as it goes along. So let's see, what are some of the other particular awfulnesses that
I should just note that every chapter in the book is followed by a few pages of vignettes or stories from the survey. So interspersed with Carol Lynn's wonderful writings, you'll find 8 or 10 narratives or paragraphs of people sharing their stories. And it's a really important part of the book.
There are feelings about this you would never even guess. My mother was petrified of dying because she was the second wife of my father and knew she would have to live polygamy forever. It broke my heart to watch her trying so hard not to die. Strange things come up around this all the time. We could just go.
Yeah, we could go.
We could go on and
on,
on, reading these awful things. My uncle's jokes about polygamy waiting for us in heaven pierced his wife's heart, and mine too, even though I was still a child. It pops up everywhere, and it's indefensible.
Another point that you make in the book, you have a chapter called 5 Pennies Make a Nickel. You talk about what sort of message polygamy sends to women about their relative worth in our culture. Can you talk about that just really briefly?
Well,
because the implications, as we say, polygamy sort of touches everything. To what extent does the teaching of polygamy send a message to women about their relative worth?
Well, it does. 2 women make a man. Or 5 pennies make a nickel. It is impossible to come up with any observation about that than that the worth of women is of lesser value than the worth of men. And I think I go through many things in the chapter there that just give us a glimpse of patriarchy in general. It's just not a good place to live. Nobody should live in patriarchy. We need to work toward partnership.
So you have 3 recommendations because you are a constructive, optimistic, positive person. You have 3 sort of visions for a partnership towards tomorrow. I'm going to read each one, and then I'm going to have you comment. Is that okay?
Sure.
You say, here are my beliefs regarding what must and will happen to achieve a Mormon future that is truly post-polygamy. Belief number 1, a couple who chooses to marry in the temple can go into that holy place and stand on equal ground. What do you mean?
The language is different in the sealing situation. Women give themselves, men receive them. The total understanding is, from the get-go, that a man will be able to have another woman sealed to him. And somehow or other, it is my belief that must and will stop. We have precedent for that. Hugh B. Brown was given permission by David O. McKay. And Brother Brown was very distressed at the confusion that happened time after time after time with women not being able to be sealed to another. So Brother Brown received permission from President McKay to do this very thing, to seal a woman to her second husband and just do it and let the Lord work it out in the next life. If the Lord's going to work all these things out in the next life, let's make it as easy as we can on the people here and now, alive. So I think that's the easiest one to do. Just make it very easy and say something like, this couple is joined to be sealed eternally, dependent only on their love and the will of the Lord. Let it be at that. Something like that.
All right. Belief number 2. This is my favorite. Section 132 of the Doctrine and Covenants will receive an inspired revision with plural marriage removed from the canon so that women and girls will be spared the wounding to our femaleness that we receive today. So just take it out?
Take it out. Well, you see, you'll need to read this chapter too. I go through many ways in which the Doctrine and Covenants was given revision. The Book of Mormon was given revision. The hymns that we sing were given revision. We didn't want to offend Missouri, so we rewrote the hymn. Long be the blood that was shed
By assassins,
Stained Illinois. We took that out because we didn't want to offend the good people of Illinois. We very seldom think, what shall we do not to offend the hearts of women? That never comes up.
And it's super interesting to learn that...
John, I just want to remember
Please.
reading Section 132, as we all do, and I have several stories here of young girls saying, in institute, in seminary, when we read Section 132, one girl said, I left the room sobbing and I never went back to seminary. Another young girl wrote, we studied 132, I went to the bathroom and I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. Now that should be a cry to arms to everybody in authority in this church. That vision of a young girl studying Section 132 and going to the bathroom and sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. They should be ashamed. Go ahead, John.
We can clap. You can clap for that. I mean, we don't have to remind everyone how many revisions the temple ceremony has been through, right? And that's supposed to have come straight from God. And of course, we know the Doctrine and Covenants, even the Book of Mormon, has experienced significant revisions. So why not the Doctrine and Covenants, right?
Of course.
But there's also just some really interesting history. The Heber J. Grant, James E. Talmage, and others put together an abbreviated version of the Doctrine and Covenants in the 1830s. And they actually removed all the stuff that sort of they felt was kind of superfluous. 1930s. And they removed all the stuff they felt was superfluous because there's a lot of stuff in there that was sort of, specific to the time and the place. So guess what? Heber J. Grant produced a version of the Doctrine and Covenants, and he left out Section 132. But when it went to print...
Was that Talmage?
Talmage was a part of it, but Heber J. Grant was also a part of it.
He was the president who authorized that.
But as it's going to print, people start getting really nervous.
The fundamentalists. And keep in mind that there were plenty of fundamentalists back then, that polygamy did not die.
It was still part of the church, right?
Right.
Yeah. And they raised a stink.
Yeah.
And so Heber J. Grant had the printing halted. But we have precedent.
He destroyed. He shredded the books that are already printed and said no more were to be published.
But we have precedent of a Mormon prophet publishing a version of the Doctrine and Covenants without Section 132. Do you guys know that? It's kind of cool, right?
And other sections were dropped as well. But 132 was a significant one that was dropped.
All right, belief number 3, the doctrine of plural marriage will be disavowed entirely and no longer considered the Word of God as pertains to history, the present, or the eternal future. Do you want an apology with that?
I wouldn't necessarily ask for one. It would be nice. It would be good.
But you basically want it disavowed.
Well, see, I think yes, indeed, yes. And I think we're getting very close to disavowing the very troublesome doctrine or teaching or whatever you want to call it about our black brothers and sisters being withheld from the priesthood and temple entry. The wording is very close to decrying, what's the word?
Denouncing?
Yes, to saying that it never should have happened in the first place. And it is my belief that eventually that will have to happen for polygamy. The church gave, in 78, gave the priesthood, but that didn't solve the problem. There continued to be a lot of very difficult things around race, and there continues today to be very difficult things around race. So that the brethren realized that they had to do something more, which, and writing that essay was a closer to the truth kind of thing. And it suggests and it gives the words that Brigham was affected by the social feelings of the day. Those may not be the correct words, but that was the intent of the words there, that Brigham was influenced by what was going on in the country today. And I believe with all my heart that eventually, and certainly this will be after I'm long gone, however, how great would it be if this could happen soon? But eventually, I believe the church will disavow plural marriage. I think there is really no leg for it to stand on. And if we're going to try to cleanse the church of the damage that polygamy has done and does today, it's very hard to say, well, God wanted it, but now we see that we don't need it anymore. I think the cleanest, clearest way to do it would be to say, this was done in error. We are finally fixing it. We are throwing away the teachings, the doctrine, so that it will no longer hurt our people. Now, John, sometime, I don't know, I'm willing to continue to whatever you want to do there, but I want to read the part in the book that I describe how the church will feel once polygamy is done away with.
Well, let's find it. Let's end with that.
Okay.
And then we'll have a question or two.
No,
you got it? You got it marked?
I do.
All right, for those who want to ask a question to Carol Lynn Pearson, if you'll just kind of cue
Yeah,
right
I have a
here.
couple of things that I want to read, but this I think is very important. The brother Joseph, whom I came to love and whom I love still, would weep to see today's tears on this subject. He himself said, I have always had the satisfaction of seeing truth triumph over error and darkness give way before light. I believe satisfaction is what the eternal spirit of Brother Joseph felt as he saw the ending of the priesthood and temple ban. And I believe that satisfaction is what Brother Joseph will feel as he sees the departure of the ghost of eternal polygamy. This departure is inevitable, I believe, because we will listen to the better angels of our nature, because we want to be not only on the right side of history, but to be on the side of right, because polygamy bears bad fruit and has failed the test of Joseph's own words of being virtuous, lovely, of good report, and praiseworthy. It has proved itself to be a destroyer. We, leadership, membership, women, men, all are better than to allow the pain and the stain of polygamy to remain on a church that is so vitally good, so profoundly strong in so many ways, and so demonstrably based on the principle of love taught by Jesus of Nazareth, by Brother Joseph, and by every other man and woman across the globe and across the centuries who grasped a spark of God and shared a godly message. When the ghost is finally banished, each young and tender girl will learn at church and at home that if she marries, she will become the singular and full partner of a husband of her choice, and that her divine nature and individual worth are such that she will never be one of, here or in heaven. The writings and the folklore around polygamy, the old stories, and the statements even of prophets will have been put away in the drawer marked expired and will generate no more fear than ghost stories told around the campfire. Every individual member of the church and every congregation will feel more open to the presence of our long-lost Heavenly Mother. For the disturbing ghost has been evicted from both earth and heaven, and the glorious goddess full and sole partner that she is in the creation and sustaining of life is welcomed back into the family. Marriages will be sweeter, with no holding back a piece of the heart just in case. A wife will sleep better, never startled in the night by the terrible thought, if I die before he does. An elderly widow will spend her last days with peace of mind and no disquieting thought of, I wonder if he has taken another wife already. A husband will invest fully in his one and precious partner, with never a thought that she is not enough here or will be added to in heaven. A widow will be able to mourn her loss, and then, if she wishes, look forward to a new relationship in which she can be seen as the desirable woman that she is, unobstructed by prior attachment. Her love for a past husband and a present husband do not conflict, for she knows that God is not asking her to make impossible choices, and that in heaven there will be many happy surprises. A man who chooses to marry a widow will do so with full confidence that this is a blessed union and can only lead to good in this world and the next for him, for her children, his children, their children, and for her deceased husband. The entire family invests only in love and not in anxiety, confident that each relationship, wife to husband, sister to brother, mother and father to children, is secure. The claim of our church, that we create and support strong families, will be even more true as the ruptures and the tensions produced by the ghost will have ceased. No one will experience apprehension over paperwork that plots out who will be with whom in heaven. All will breathe easily, confident that in the spectacular organization of the family of God, our Father and Mother in heaven, all of us will receive, with each person we have loved and been loved by, a perfectly designed relationship with eternal joy in good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, a connection that our earthly mind cannot now begin to grasp. And intertwined with every benefit will be the supreme one, a God who has prepared an eternity that will break the hearts of women and render them forever subordinate, will be dismissed as preposterous. We will see with more clarity and with deeper appreciation the one in the mirror, the one on the other side of the bed, and the one who thought this all up in the first place. A new buoyancy will render us a stronger people, a people more prepared to gift the Lord with our portion of Zion.
How's that for prophet, seer, and revelator? I'm voting you prophet, seer, and revelator. Is that okay? Can we sustain? All in favor? Any opposed? Is that blasphemous?
That's wonderful.
That's right.
We are all.
She knows what's
we
going
are
on.
all in our own wonderful, private, sometimes public way, prophets and seers and revelators.
All right. Well, I think we've kept you here a long time. Is there anyone dying to ask a question? All right, Martine.
Hi, Carolyn. About a year and a half ago, I heard you say that you were going to mail a copy to each of the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency. So I wondered how that went. And the second part of the question, but it relates to the first, is that obviously the top two men, as John mentioned earlier, and you did too, top two leaders of the church are eternal polygamists. So my hopes are not great that anything is going to change anytime soon. What's your view?
Okay.
So for those in the listening audience, the question is, did she mail a copy of this book to all the members of the Quorum of the 12 in the First Presidency?
Yes, I did, along with a copy addressed by name to each wife. And I didn't expect to hear back from any of them. But I have reason to believe that some of them were looked at. I have hope that there have been conversations. I know nothing, but I have hope that some of those were looked at. As to how I feel about our two top leaders being eternal polygamists, that is none of my business. What Brother Nelson and what President Nelson and President Oaks do is not my business. I try very hard to follow a spiritual lead of a teacher that I love. Many of you know Byron Katie, who says, you have to look at everything in this world as either your business or God's business or their business. And if you get out of your business and try to mess around in their business or God's business, it's useless. And so I am content to stay in my business. And I know that my business is to look around and see the suffering of my sisters and see the suffering of my brothers. And when I see suffering, it is my business to call attention to it. And that's what I have done in my writing, and that's what I will continue to do in my speaking from now until the day I die. And that is my business, and I will do it as strongly as I can.
Any other questions for, yes, Lindsay? Yeah, come talk to the mic, if that's okay. That way it'll make it into the recording. Come back this way because of the feedback. Thank you.
You've talked so beautifully about it, so I don't want to destroy the spirit of that. I was hoping you could talk about how this doctrine has really set up a lot of grooming behavior in our community. You know what I'm talking about? Seminary teachers and stepdads and things like that.
Thank you.
In our LDS community, or well, it certainly has, and Lindsay has helped to make us very, very much aware of all of the damage that's done in the FLDS community and some of the other groups. But this concept certainly does affect, and in a grooming kind of unnatural way, to groom young women for male authority, whatever it looks like. And I didn't tell, one of the stories in the book is from a young woman who said, I was being taken home by the babysitter, and all of a sudden he began to the babysitter is saying I was taken home by the man whose children I had been babysitting, and all of a sudden he started to talk to me about D&C 132 and did I know what it meant, and soon he was telling me that I was going to be one of his wives, and we got to my home and he kissed me, and I ran in, and my father could see how, and anyway, the father told the man, called the man and said if he ever contacted his girl again, he'd break his face. But you see, from the beginning, girls are taught to respect authority. Girls are taught that the boys receive the priesthood and they don't, and that they are to have reverence for the priesthood. So, of course, that's a grooming. Nor did I tell that, I mean, we all know the terrible story of Elizabeth Smart. And not that she was willing and groomed to take the terrible authority of that man, but that crazy man took the door of Mormon polygamy to make that happen. And nor did I tell the story of the mission president in the 80s in Australia who went rogue. And this has been told in by other places as well. And had personal interviews with his 12 sister missionaries and began to groom them about polygamy. And they looked up to him as they would look up to God. He was their authority figure. And before the story got out, by one of the smart girls calling home, he had sexual relations with 6 of the missionaries. That is an extreme thing. It's a very extreme thing. But it shows what can happen when the idea of polygamy is still present in the atmosphere. And when young women are taught to give tremendous respect to the male portion of the community because they are the ones who carry the power of God. And that's all I want to say right now, but I'm sure Lindsay could say a lot more.
Other final questions? Yes, Kelly, come speak here.
I was just curious. We've talked mostly tonight about polygyny, more specifically in the LDS Church. I was just wondering if you had an opinion on the practice of consensual polyamory, though.
I have no use for it. That's just a personal thought. I have no use for polyamory. I believe in commitment of one-to-one. I know there are plenty who feel differently, but I'm the one you asked.
I love it. Okay, is there anything else you wanted to make sure?
Well, yes, John, I have one more thing to read. I don't like to read a lot. But this I wrote out because I didn't want to misspeak. Tonight, I am formally offering what you might call a personal manifesto. I am declaring that there is a whole set of new stories. Call this the Mormon Women's section. Stories to be put on the same table and examined under the same light as the many thousands of stories from women that were recently the result of what we may call the Harvey Weinstein phenomenon. The dynamics are different, but the results are the same. The teachings and policies in the LDS Church regarding the likelihood and often the assurance of eternal polygamy is nothing less than gender-based abuse. It is an assault on the spiritual, emotional, and sexual lives of LDS women. This is not a good day to defend the abuse of women, because I have heard from or spoken with thousands of believing or formerly believing LDS women. I can report how these teachings and policies cause large numbers of women to feel. The words they use sound like an echo of words you have been reading or hearing on the national scene. I feel violated, intimidated, held hostage, used, threatened, crazy, confused, angry, terrified, powerless, voiceless, inadequate, insecure in my marriage. I'm seen as property, as eternal chattel, in danger of being destroyed just like Emma, without dignity, hopeless, of lesser value than a man in God's eyes, soul sick. In the words of one woman, bludgeon is the right term. I have felt bludgeoned by polygamy. Soul sick, bludgeoned, assaulted, abused. And the abuser, a personage given a place of high honor in our church, a personage that I call the Ghost of Eternal Polygamy. His mission purportedly is to connect the human family in God's kingdom. To my observation, he divides and destroys. His main achievement is to break the hearts of women. In the Book of Mormon, we read regarding the Nephite men taking more than one wife, "Ye have broken the hearts of your tender wives, and the sobbings of their hearts ascend up to God against you." This is not a good day to defend breaking the hearts of women. Catchy phrases have cropped up in today's culture. Across the country, "Me Too." In Hollywood, "Time's Up." I do not have a short and snappy phrase for us, but I do have a very powerful one, and one that I will hold to until the day I die. We are better than this, and we must do better than this.
I promised Carol Lynn a standing ovation. Looks like it's happening. Thank you, Carolyn. We love you so much. Before you guys leave, I just want to thank a few people. Amy Grubbs, is Sharon still here? Amy and Sharon, can you guys come forward? These events are made possible by so many people. This is Sharon Price, who helped us organize this event tonight. Thank you, Aaron. This is Amy. Amy is Director of Operations. This is Cody Layton. Cody helps us in all sorts of ways, including editing the podcast. I want to thank Trevor Haugen for being willing to do audio and video tonight. And I want to thank my lovely wife, Margie, and Claire is here with her. They make all of this possible. Love you guys. Thank you so much. Want to thank the Community of Christ for allowing us to have our meeting here. They're so lovely. Please give them your support if you feel so inclined. Want to thank all those who donate, support the Open Stories Foundation. Many of you here are supporters. Your donations are what makes all this possible as well. And just most of all, many of you had things you could have been doing tonight. I am so heartfelt grateful that we filled the room and we're able to show Carol Lynn Pearson how much she means to us and how grateful we are for her work. So I love you all, and I'm just very grateful that you would come and to show your support for Carol Lynn. And she wants to say something else.
John, I find that in our discussion it has not yet come up, and I think it is a question for many who will be listening here, if I still participate in the church. And consequently, I would like to just tell you that, yes, I do. I'm very active in my Walnut Creek 2nd Ward in California. And believe it or not, I feel much loved in my ward and much loved in my stake. And there are many people in my ward who have read this book, many of whom have told me it has changed their lives and changed their marriage. And a very dear woman has said to me, I can now snuggle up to my husband in bed and whisper to him, "You are mine, all mine." So this is the church experience that I have in my ward. And I just want to make sure that is understood, that I am, and I believe in the goodness of Mormondom. And I believe with Karen Armstrong, who was a Catholic nun who left the church and hated religion and came back and said, let us get back into the heart of every religion and get rid of the stuff that is poisonous or that is foul, and get back to compassion and get back to the golden rule. And this is what I hope for my Mormon community, that we can get rid of some of the things that still are foul, and that we can get into true compassion and the golden rule and become a true part, our own corner of the Lord's vast Zion. Thanks.
I want to issue a quick challenge to everyone. I would so love to see that table emptied. Carolyn brought a bunch of books for you to purchase. There isn't a book that she's created that isn't a perfect gift for someone you love. So if any of you feel generous or supportive or grateful or just interested in having a wonderful gift to give to yourself or to someone else, I would love to see that table empty by the time we leave here tonight.
And the Ghost of Polygamy is $20 on Amazon. It's $15 out there.
So discount. And those of you in the internet, please buy Carol Lynn Pearson's books, carolinpearson.com. And the Ghost of Eternal Polygamy should be the first book you get. It's so powerful.